You're watching VinylicPumaGaming. What's up guys, back with another Borderlands 2 video, and today I'd like to talk about the community patch and why it is so important. Now, the obvious thing is that it allows the community to come together and discuss how certain items that are fairly bad should be rebalanced. So far, I think it's pretty cool that the official Gearbox forum has even allowed discussion about the community patch. And I think this is a major step in the right direction, and I'm glad that the moderators over there are allowing the discussion to occur. Whether it's due to some kind of liability or for some other reason, typically you can't really talk a whole lot about modding as it may violate the terms of service agreements for the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, or in the past, the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. This was always a really big barrier to talking about a lot of this stuff, and now that we've got something that can only exist on PC, and that is sort of independent of the Gib save editor, as well as, I guess, like cheat engine, people can now discuss more of this stuff openly without fear of the banhammer. Ultimately, it's pretty cool how the community patch itself is implemented. By simply modifying your Borderlands 2 executable on PC, you can unlock the console and run your very own custom scripts for the game. And this allows you to do things like modify how existing guns work by changing their damage, accuracy, magazine size, and how much ammo they consume. And of course, there are other factors that you can change as well. Many in the community, including myself, have wanted Gearbox to rebalance a lot of the lousier weapons in Borderlands 2 for quite some time. For example, E-Tech sniper rifles were ideally balanced for normal and true Vault Hunter mode, however Gearbox never took the time to rebalance them for Ultimate Vault Hunter mode. The result being that you have weapons that are technically rarer, but are also inferior to weapons that are just of purple rarity. So for example, an E-Tech sniper rifle on a critical hit will always deal less damage than a purple rarity sniper rifle from the same manufacturer. I think the other thing too is that many in the community were perplexed by the lack of buffs that were offered by Gearbox's officially supported $100,000 loot hunt event. True, some of the buffs were really great, like the improvements to the fastball and the improvements to the Lady Fist, but many of the buffs barely improved any of the weapons at all. And case in point, some of the buffs were things like increased reload speed and +1 magazine size for bandit shotguns, or slightly increased damage for the Madhouse. There was even a buff that increases the stability of Dahl submachine guns. Now, I'm not saying that buffs like these didn't do anything, but many of the buffs or rebalances that the $100,000 loot hunt offered were fairly inadequate for most of the dedicated veteran player base at the time. It was kind of crazy if you think about it. Gearbox did this event to support the Game of the Year edition of Borderlands 2, and I think it was meant to draw in both new and veteran players alike. And it ultimately just ended up being somewhat of a disappointment, especially for the veteran players out there. Instead of really going through and overhauling the weapons to make them better like the community wanted, in the vast majority of cases, a lot of these buffs offered by the community loot hunt event only made these items just like slightly better than before. I mean, giving the Madhouse a 20% damage buff isn't really going to really get me to use the Madhouse over any of the other assault rifles in the game. However, maybe giving the Madhouse a 100% damage boost with a slight tweak to its accuracy and maybe making it compatible with Gage's Close Enough skill would make me more likely to use the Madhouse. And thankfully, to some extent with the community patch, we can now do things like this on the PC version. While I think it's nice that we can now fix a lot of the bad items in this game, the community patch does open up the opportunity of creating custom mods for the community to enjoy. We're slowly starting to see things like this on the BLC Mods GitHub page, where some modders are creating almost entirely new weapons by simply modifying things like display text, modifying textures, and also by modifying how some weapons fire. It's crazy to think that I can use the Gib save editor to give myself a bitch SMG, then I can go online, copy some code, paste it into a text file, run the script, and turn my bitch SMG into an almost entirely different weapon. Now, if you're watching the gameplay for this particular video, this is a new weapon mod made by Exotech909, and it's called the Sine Wave. And after looking at some of the code, it apparently combines the firing pattern of the Octo shotgun with, presumably, I guess, with the bitch. And it creates this really cool and interesting zigzag sine wave pattern, and you get it on, I guess, every alternate projectile. So maybe one time it'll fire it in one direction, then in the other, or then another time it'll fire just a straight projectile. Regardless, the end result is something that's entirely new and unique, and is something that we really haven't seen before, whether that's in, I guess, Borderlands 2 or even the pre-sequel. The ability to create these entirely new weapons in particular is why I think the community patch is so important. Sure, the ability to fix awful weapons like the Bearcat, Landscaper, and Storm Sniper is cool, and I'm glad Shadow Evil was able to go through and finally fix E-Tech sniper rifles in particular. However, the ability to morph all of these weapons into something that is entirely new is what is truly spectacular. A dream I've always had is to use some of the cooler weapons in the pre-sequel, like the Longnail Sniper, the Flare Shotgun, or the Fast Talker SMG on some of my Borderlands 2 characters. And it's really cool that I can now sort of do that thanks to the efforts of these modders. While it sucks that these mods aren't standalone, like what you might see with a Bethesda Game Studios game, like Skyrim or Fallout 4, the fact that we're getting some mod support is really exciting for me personally. And I've always wanted to see user-generated content in Borderlands, and I'm glad we're finally getting to see it in Borderlands 2 in particular. Now, there are some mods for Borderlands 1, but really for Borderlands 2, they really locked the game down, and you can't really do a lot of that same stuff. But I digress. In a sense, it's almost like we're getting entirely new weapon DLCs for Borderlands 2, almost 3 years after the Son of Cromorax came out. And really, you could go even further back than that and say that it's been almost 3.5 years since we've even seen a new gun in Borderlands 2, as Digistruct Peak was the last piece of DLC that added new guns to the game. The community patch, and by extension, community patch mods, are something to actually get pretty excited about. And for people like me that have been playing with the same guns over and over again for the past 2 to 3 years, it's nice to see something really fresh and really new for once. And while the modding community over on GitHub is really still in its infancy, it's steadily growing, and I'm going to predict that we're going to reach a point in the future where you can download an entire mod pack that replaces 50 or more of the in-game weapons with entirely new creations. Imagine the following scenario for a moment. So, you've just played Borderlands 2 for the first time, and you've done almost everything that the game has to offer. Or maybe you're an old Borderlands 2 veteran, and you got bored with Borderlands 2 after beating Digistruct Peak a couple of times. Instead of going on and playing another game, maybe you could go back and play through Borderlands 2 again with one of these mods installed. That way, when you go back and farm the bunker for your bitch SMG, maybe you end up with the Sine Wave SMG instead. Or instead of getting a Boom Puppy assault rifle for completing that awful quest involving Enrique the Fire Skag, maybe you get a Torg Bastard assault rifle instead. I've got a feeling that people would play through the entire game again just to discover what some of these new weapons are. And for the build tweakers out there that are always looking for new ways to maximize their DPS, the introduction of some balance-friendly mods like these would have them spending a lot more time playing Borderlands 2. The only sad thing about all of this is that you currently can't add any new assets to Borderlands 2. This sucks, because it would have been cool to see lasers from Borderlands the pre-sequel in Borderlands 2, or even some entirely new weapon elements that we haven't even seen before. But even still, I'm pretty excited to see what modders will be able to accomplish over the next couple of months with these limitations. I think the bigger thing though is that I hope Gearbox is watching all of this unfold and they implement some kind of modding functionality into the PC and maybe even the console versions of the next Borderlands game. The ability to have something like what Bethesda has, where you can download a couple mods that replace some of the existing weapons in the game with entirely new creations, is really cool, and would probably increase playtime by a lot. Or maybe you could get a couple friends together and play in your own custom lobby where some items are replaced with functionally unique weapons. This would be an amazing feature that would make Borderlands 3 stand out from the Destiny series or the Division, which are mostly these quasi-MMO type experiences where the developers always determine the type of experience that you're going to have. And yeah, while those games are fun, I'd still like the ability for more customization and more content. And I think Gearbox has a real opportunity here to do something really cool with Borderlands 3 if they implement some mod tools in the future. I also think that it would be really beneficial to getting this modding community off of the ground if the official Gearbox forum allowed discussion about the creation of some of these gun and weapon mods for Borderlands 2. That way, modders could get invaluable feedback from one of the main places where people go to discuss the game. Overall, I don't really see this as being a big issue, provided that these mods are only possible on the PC version, and most of them are simply just replacements for what already exists in the game. In fact, it might be cool to have an entire section on the Gearbox forum dedicated to people creating their own gun and weapon mods for Borderlands 2 using this entire feature. Maybe this won't happen, but I think if it did, you would definitely see modding becoming a lot more popular for Borderlands. Ultimately, I think acceptance of the community patch on the Gearbox forum and some of the popularity surrounding community patch mods could be a good sign that we might get some kind of mod support for Borderlands 3. Or at least I hope the developers over at Gearbox are looking at the popularity of something like this, its reception by the community as a whole, and they're looking into implementing it into the next Borderlands game. Because I think over time, people will get used to this being in the game, and I hope Gearbox takes the time to allocate some resources for creating some kind of mod tool for Borderlands 3. What would be even crazier is if this functionality could get passed on to console users somehow, and it would be nice if you could download a mod developed on the PC and use it on your console. I guess we'll see what happens, but in the meantime, I'm pretty excited to see what the modding community is going to be coming up with. But alright guys, that's going to wrap up this particular video, and I want to know, what do you guys think of the new community patch and the community patch mods? Have you tried any yet? Are you curious to try them? Let me know in the comments, but otherwise guys, like this video if you liked it, click the bell to join the notification squad, and as always, take care, and I'll see y'all next time.